Well, hello, Cal. You're in a different spot. I believe you're somewhere nice and warm and lots of fun.
Certainly a lot warmer than back in Adelaide at the moment, Mel. I'm on the Gold Coast with my family and lots of kids running around and enjoying the warm weather and the pools. We were at SeaWorld today, actually, Mel. So
Nice.
there's been a fair bit happening.
What was the best thing at SeaWorld?
Okay. It was tough because there was so much, but certainly the dolphins caught Layla's attention. They were absolutely spectacular and uh, I think the seals early on, there was a particular seal named Max that Layla kept referring to over the day. So, yeah, they were probably the highlights, but certainly I love the way that they're going about it with the education for the kids these days and making sure that we're keeping the world as tidy as possible to save as many of these magnificent creatures as possible. But it was a fantastic day, loved it, and we've got movie world to come.
Oh, I love Movie World, but that's
Yes.
because I'm a wannabe actress. I can tell you when I went to Movie World, I put my hand up and was selected for all the audience participation things.
Oh,
But
I love that.
it probably surprises you very much about me, I know. But anyway,
Oh, you would have loved the limelight.
me. I'm loving it right now. Let's get on and
Absolutely.
talk some cricket. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Timed Out for Sporting News Australia. Melinda Farrell here, joined as always by Callum Ferguson, who is very kindly taking a little break out of his holiday to discuss all things cricket. So thanks, Cal. Your dedication is to be admired. Um,
Oh, we always keep our eye on the cricket, don't we? Wherever we are, Mel. Nothing
Absolutely.
changes. We're diehards.
Even throughout the night, which is, of course, what I've been doing with Australia in Sri Lanka. And, well,
Mm,
yeah, ODI series. I mean, it's been a competitive tour so far, you'd have to say. Australia losing back to back ODIs to Sri Lanka for the first
mm.
time in 20 years. And we also have oh, God, now I'm going to get my names wrong. That's not good. Patham Nasanka. I was going to say Passam Nathanka. I'm so bad at spoonery. But Nasanka, what a century that was. The highest score by a Sri Lankan male cricketer in an ODI against Australia. A record chase against Australia. It was one of those nights. What have you made of this Australian team that's been hit by injuries, but has been outclassed a
Yeah.
couple of times in the 50 over format by Sri Lanka?
It really has been. And look, they are playing in their home conditions. We know that makes a big difference, regardless of the format. We've seen that historically in all three formats. But certainly, Nasanka was one I thought was fantastic on the Australian tour. So
Mm.
to see him playing really well in varied conditions, both home and away, is enormously exciting for Sri Lankan cricket. They're showing a fair bit. The World Cup, the T20 World Cup. I thought they surprised a few with some of their younger players that were putting their hand up and enjoying a bit of time out in the middle in international cricket at a young age, and they're only growing and getting better with the experience. The fact they've been able to take on such a strong Australian lineup so regularly in the time since that World Cup, they'll be a threat to a number of teams in the upcoming T20 World Cup. But to see Nasanka go to another level in ODI cricket, the future is so bright for that young man, and to see him perform so well was magnificent. But the Australians have been asked a few questions physically as well as out in the middle, so it's been a challenging tour so far for the Australians. They're going to have to come up with some answers leading into the Test matches.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it was interesting. The first ODI ended up being the quicks, the Sri Lankan quicks that took wickets. But you talk about
Yeah.
the young spinners and the likes of Walalage, Thishana, they've been
Mm.
really challenging for Australia. Whereas Australia are, obviously they're without Adam Zampa. We know that. We know that
Yeah.
Akar is out. They've gone with Matthew Kuhneman making his debut. Just wondering what your thoughts are on him. This is a real test of Australia's spin stocks. I guess, which we'll talk about in more depth. But is that one of the
Mm.
key differences between the two sides at the moment? Is just how they're handling spin and how they're able to produce spin?
Yeah, look, I think that's certainly shone through, if not on the back of injury and obviously Adam Zampa missing. That's not, you know, forget about that. That makes a big difference to any side when they're having to plug gaps when they're losing so many players to injury. So certainly the Australians are depleted. I think the most exciting thing from both sides' point of view is the fact that there are some younger players starting to get a bit of exposure. And Matt Kuhneman's, probably not the youngest guy on the world stage to start playing for Australia, but he's certainly got youth on his side. And he's a guy that probably has been a bit of a victim of the Australian domestic circuit, not being particularly spin friendly in general over the last sort of 5 to 6 years. But we're starting to see a few more flatter wickets, which is good in domestic cricket. We've talked about that before. I won't go down that path again because you won't stop me for hours. But certainly it's great to see him get an opportunity. He's been fantastic on the domestic scene in white ball cricket in particular. His red ball cricket's starting to develop, so that's exciting. So there might be a chance he'll debut in Test cricket. Who knows? Right place, right time. It's great that the A series is happening side by side with this international series. It's enabled Australia to probably have a little bit more depth, which they've ended up needing more than they expected on the back of so many injuries. That's got to be a worry, particularly with David Beakley, who had been a long-serving physiotherapist with the team, leaving the side recently. There's got to be an adjustment period, no doubt, but certainly the Australians have got enough concerns at the moment. But from a spin-specific point of view, Sri Lanka have got some options there now, and these guys are starting to see some cricket around the world in other tournaments, T20 I'm talking here. So, they're really giving Australia a few headaches at the moment, and it's only the beginning. There's the Test cricket, the big one's coming. So Australia have got to find some answers, and they've got some experience in that lineup, the Australians. So particularly against spin, Usman Khawaja has been a big improver against spin over the last few years, and we know Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne have got twinkle toes, and I feel like Travis Head batting in the middle order in these ODIs has certainly got a taste for it now. So I feel like the Australians have got some answers.
All right. I think it's also worth pointing out when we talk about, yes, Australia have been without a number of players, but Sri Lanka being without Hasaranga as well, who has really caused a lot of problems for Australia. So they've been without him for the last
That's
couple of
right.
games. So I think that's really worthwhile to, pointing out.
Absolutely,
Stronger with
yeah.
him in there. So let's break that down a little bit more, shall we? Talking about spin, and I guess specifically looking ahead at that test. So Ashton Agar has said he will not be available. He's got a bit of a side strain. He won't be available for the first test.
Yeah.
So obviously Nathan Lyon will come back in, and he spoke to the media this week as well, and obviously loves Sri Lanka because it's where he made his debut, took his first Test cricket,
Absolutely.
took us quite far in that first Test as well.
That's right.
But
The goat.
yeah, without him, you've got Mitchell Swepson, who bowled in Pakistan and so has some Test experience. And then you've also obviously got Matthew Kuhnemann, who's come in here as well. They've got a couple of other spinners, the likes of Tanvir Sangha there, or they've got bowlers like we've seen Marnus Labuschagne bowling in this series. We've seen Travis Head. I think he bowled one over in the second loss. And Glenn Maxwell has been bowling a lot. So how do you see Australia doing it? Nathan Lyon said he thought it was a two-spinner situation. But in Gaul, is there a possibility that we could see three spinners and a debut for someone, or something sort of a bit left field?
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier, and if that was to happen, then I think Matt Kuhnemann would be coming into that side. I think just on the back of the fact he's probably got a little bit more, or a few more miles under his belt, playing with Queensland. And the only reason I say that is he's getting a taste for it at the moment in ODI cricket. So That's international cricket. That's international pressure. I feel like if they were to go to a third, it would probably be him just at the minute. Obviously, with the leg spin of Swepson in there already. But again, I can't. I'm with the goat. I can't see it happening. I think it'll be a two spinner situation. Our quicks are so good, and they are guys that have some skill sets and some tricks up their sleeve on flat wickets. They've had exposure recently in Pakistan. They know how to grind it out. I'd be surprised if they go to a third spinner when they've got such an arsenal up their sleeve with pace on the ball. That's the way I see it lying.
And I guess the choice there of going left arm and leg spin, does that ever come into it over there, or are you just going to basically pick the two that you think are able to play a holding role for a long period of time, play an attacking role? I mean, we say spinners, but there's so many different spin
Yes.
roles in there. It's not just a one size fits all.
No, that's right. And all conditions are different. Bowling tight and keeping things tidy on flat wickets takes a fair bit different skill set than it does on a slow turner. The areas are so different. The spin can create angles to score from. So it's a different kettle of fish altogether. I do feel as though they'll go with Swepson and Lyon. I feel like they'll be keen to give Swepson another crack at it. He will have assessed after Pakistan, there's no doubt about it. And he'll come back in with the experience under his belt. That'll give him some confidence, I feel. So, yeah, that's the way I feel like they'll go. But there is some differences between going from a left-arm orthodox to a leg spinner. Yes, they both turn the same way, but certainly they're both very different styles. So I wouldn't lump them in the same category. I wouldn't say, just because they're both turning it away from or into left-hand, right-hand, right-hand, left-hand, then it doesn't bother me too much. You could go a right arm leg spinner and a left arm ortho if you wanted to, but it'll be Swepson and Lyon for mine.
Now, you talk about the value of having Australia A there at the moment. We've seen a lot of people attribute India's success away in recent times, at least partly because of the amount of touring that their A side has done under Rahul Dravid.
Yes.
I mean, this tour, it's not just about having bodies on the ground, although that has ended up being incredibly useful. But this A series it's been a cracking series as well, an amazing chance, like an overseas academy for sort of this next generation of Australian players, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. And I think that the BCCI should be applauded for sending their A side away so often and giving their team exposure, the next generation exposure so regularly. That is to be applauded. And it's not just because it's, affording them the ability to improve their white ball cricket. It's the red ball cricket as well, which is great. So, I think it's something that other countries would be envious of. And it's obviously been tricky with COVID recently, but I think Australia would certainly be well served if they were to send their A side overseas a little bit more regularly and just give them as much opportunity to improve in different conditions, particularly their spinners. Though I just feel like the spinners will be the ones, and the middle order batters will be the ones that gain the most out of those tours, because you can't trick up wickets in Australia like anything really like what you're going to face over in the subcontinent. So there's some hybrid wickets being developed. We know that, but certainly there's nothing like actually being there and touring. So it'll certainly hold our young Australians in good stead. We've seen Josh Philippe really put his hand up as a middle order player in those spinning turning conditions and make a couple of significant scores coming in, and no doubt starting against spin. So that's a huge win already for the Australian side or the Australian setup. So we'll be watching closely in the coming games to see more development from players. Tanvir Sangha took 4 in the second innings. So, great signs already, and we will benefit from that, just like the BCCI have.
Now let's turn our attention to something else that has been certainly reported on during the week. Nothing official yet, as we record, but it certainly has been. Pete Lawler has been reporting in the Australian that Cricket Australia are likely to introduce a draft for the Big Bash this year. Now, it's not the first time it's been spoken of, but it looks like it's going to happen this time. So, just wondering, someone who's obviously played in the Big Bash and in other leagues around the world, what do you think about the idea of an overseas draft? Is it going to be enough to combat what we've spoken about in previous episodes, this new tournament coming in the UAE with the big bucks, competing directly as far as time goes to the Big Bash? Is a draft going to be enough?
Look, a draft will be enough if there's enough dollars next to the draft picks. I think that's what it's going to come down to. And look, I like the idea of a draft, particularly in the format that was being spoken about for last year's BBL, and that included a wild card pick, which would allow teams that have an icon player, a player that's been, almost a franchise player, someone like Rashid Khan at the strikers. If each team's got a wild card, and say the Sixers have picked one and they try to pick or poach Rashid Khan, the strikers can come over the top with their wild card and make sure he ends up at the right team. Look, I've got no doubt someone like Rashid Khan will come. He loves Adelaide to bits. He's spoken to me personally about potentially living there once he's finished playing. But certainly, I think there'll be a lot of players that will be starting to see the bright lights of the UAE tournament, the T20 league over there. IPL franchise owners are now looking at South African franchises in their T20 league over there. So no doubt there'll be more cash influx into that South African league, which will run at a similar time of year as well. So there's going to be an enormous amount of competition now. The BBL pays less than some of these other tournaments. It runs for longer, significantly longer. There's more games and more time away from home. I think they're going to have to lift the salary cap to make sure that they're able to pay overseas players, enough money to justify the time away from home. Because at the moment, and this was something that the players warned the Cricket Australia about after they'd already made their decision, once they found out they were looking at expanding to 14 games, it's just too long at the moment for the overseas players and doesn't pay enough. So that'll be what decides whether it's going to be enough to bring them over. You can't just have a draft and not pay enough. It just doesn't change anything for them. They're going to need to up the amount of dollars being spent.
I mean, a couple of interesting chats with people. I think one thing that Cricket Australia would like to do is ensure that they had Australian players available for the Big Bash. Now, that's not going to happen with the test players while the tests are on, obviously. You've now got, I think, this worry. It's not going to, this summer, I should say, that series against South Africa is already very problematic anyway. But, we see ODI cricket almost disappear from Australia in January and maybe tacked on with a few games in a February time slot, which then becomes very hard because overseas tours start happening about then. But I think that Cricket Australia would like to see some of their own big stars available, and what that does to 50 over cricket, I don't know, but I think it looks pretty shaky.
Yeah, look, I think that one of the priorities needs to be that, if nothing else, the Australian international players are available at the business end of the tournament. But ideally, they need to be playing the majority of the tournament. And in the format it is at the moment, with it being such a long tournament, it's really, really hard to make that happen. But what at the very least, I think needs to happen is those international players, the Australian international players, need to be available for at least the last few rounds of the minor round, running into finals, because that's when all the eyes are on, really, and that's when you want all of the eyes on the big games. And last year was really disappointing to see that the structure of the VBL didn't allow Stephen Smith to play in the finals. So that was laughable in itself. So what we need to see is the international players available and the structure to allow them to play in the Big Bash. It just needs to be in place, and there needs to be levers ready to be pulled to make sure that happens if those international players are available.
Yep. Like I said, goodbye ODI cricket in the height
Oh,
of summer in
ODI
Australia.
cricket,
It's
yeah.
gone.
I mean, it is in trouble, ODI cricket, with regards to where do we fit it in. And
Mhm.
I nearly skipped over that then. But I still think that we need to be playing ODI cricket. I think it's still rating well enough, and it's reeling in enough money overseas in particular for it to be a long-standing part of the fixturing and the future tour program. So it needs to be in there somewhere. At the moment, with the way the Big Bash is formatted, it's making it really, really difficult. It's just a logjam, Mel, and it needs to be addressed. It needs to be fixed. And I work for Channel 7. I know they're willing to sit down with Cricket Australia to work out some of these issues. So I'd love to see some of these issues addressed so that everyone gets what they want.
Yeah, that new deal that's negotiated for next year will be very interesting because, of course, Cricket Australia can't just arbitrarily cut the number of games on their own. It all comes down to broadcast deals that have been signed.
That's
So,
right.
yeah, it's interesting to see. I wonder how Fox Sports feel about that as well as the other major
Yeah.
stakeholder. But let's talk about, if you're talking about Channel 7 and commentators, Lisa Sthalekar,
Yes.
one of your colleagues there, someone who I've worked with as well. So put that out there. She's been
Mm.
confirmed as the first female FICA president, the International Players Association, if you like. Um, First time a woman has ever been appointed in that role. So that is a massive glass ceiling to be broken by Lisa. What
Absolutely.
does it mean for Lisa to get this role, Cal? How important is it?
Well, without having spoken to her about the role specifically and what it meant to her, I think it means a lot for world cricket. And I think, like you mentioned, it does shatter a glass ceiling. And, we'll no doubt see a lot more women instilled in roles around the world, no doubt, potentially on the back of this and inspired by this. Um, Lisa is a really, really well experienced, well respected, and someone who, person within the game, and she's got an enormous amount of experience with international cricket. She toured as a player, she's toured as a commentator. She knows the ropes of international cricket better than just about anyone, and I'm just so pumped because she is exactly what we need in a leader in that role. We need someone who is strong in their convictions, has a really good handle on the international game from a male and female point of view. She's commentated it all. She's played as an international women's player. I just think she fits the bill, and I'm really pumped for her as a colleague as well because I've been able to spend a lot of time with her recently, and to see her speak to her about the game so passionately tells me that she's going to be a perfect fit and she's going to do a wonderful job.
Yeah, of course, she has been involved heavily with the ACA as well. I guess it does show. I know that the ICC have had implemented programs in the past sort of year or so, mentorship programs for female leaders, and I know that the ACA has done that with cricket in Australia as well. They've been trying to get people like Belinda Clark to mentor young women in leadership as well. I guess we talked the last time about Greg Barclay's comments about women's Test cricket and how that wasn't in the future. I guess that shows why it's really good to have some diversity, not just women, but diversity of thought generally about the game, in just making sure that that's put out there. I'm pretty certain I know Lisa well enough to know that if she heard that being said in a room, she would be quite a cricket viewpoint, which I guess is really important. And we still don't have enough female leadership in the game generally.
Yeah, look, we certainly need that point debated. we certainly can't allow it to slide through. That comment about women's Test cricket was pretty disappointing. So no doubt, I'm with you. I think Lisa would have jumped on that straight away. And there does need to be strong debate had about the game, because we need all points heard, and we need to make sure that we get the right outcomes for the game and the health of the game. Whether we agree with everything that gets decided, what's best for the game is the most important thing. And no doubt Lisa will aid in making sure that we see the game grow and prosper, and at the same time the players looked after. It's a short career that you have in the game, and I feel like she's got a really good handle on what it's like to be a player, and what it's like to be a touring player, which takes you away from home a lot, and making sure that all of the players are well looked after, because at the end of the day, the players are the product really, and they are the inspiration for the next generation, and we just want to make sure everyone is healthy, because it's a tough road on as an international player. Sometimes a lot of stress, a lot of time away from family and
she
friends
will
as well.
indeed.
So
and look, I'm not going to keep you away from your family any longer, because I know that you will have to help with bedtime and mealtime.
That's right. Yes, that's true.
Oh,
But
that's
I've always
so
got
nice to
a lot of
hear.
time
Thank
to
you
time
as
down.
always, Cal. Thank you at home for joining us for our little chat. We'll be back again with more cricket talk. We'll be keeping a keen eye on the world of cricket over the next week. So if you see anything that you'd like us to chat about, please do let us know. Give us a like and a subscribe, and go check out a lot of the stories that we have up there on Sporting News Australia. So until next week, have a great time on the Goldie, Cal. Enjoy Movie World, and I want you to go in there, put your hand up for the participation, and please let someone film you in like a Superman movie or something.
Oh, nothing would please my wife more than to catch me out doing something ridiculous like that.
Excellent. Yes, well, I'm with her on that one. We'll see you next week. See you, Cal.
See you, Mel. Great to see you again, and join us next week.